in those early days, there wasn't much news, particularly local news.
Right.
It was pretty basic.
Right. It was rip and read like radio. You know, so much of our stuff came from radio.
From the wire services.
Yeah, the wire services, right. And then Bill Grove actually came to us as an announcer, and he got assigned once to do the news, and doing the news was ripping it off the machine, coming out and sitting behind a desk and doing it. And I'm sure he got the idea we can do better than this, and he started a news department at about 1955 or so, and he talked him into getting a fax machine so we would get pictures on the wire as well as stories, and we could talk a photographer into. We didn't have news photographers, so we had a station photographer who took still pictures and did have a camera, but he could talk him into taking the camera out and shooting fires or whatever, local news, and come back and put that on the air. And little by little, the 5-minute newscast developed into more than just reading the news.
Mm-hmm. And Bill Grove was a teacher. He didn't have any training or anything that would necessarily make you think he was going to be this newsman, anchorman.
Except he'd been a broadcaster. He'd been an announcer for quite a bit of time. And
but there were a lot of announcers who didn't have whatever he had that developed into being a real news director.
That's right. I don't know how he did it, but
just one of those things.
That's right. Yeah. And had the ability also to talk the management into spending money to get this and that and the other.
And I guess management, and by management we would at that time be referring to Glenn Marshall, was generally supportive of efforts to develop a news department.
I guess they must have been. Yeah, but I think also the fact that you could get sponsors. The people, you know, I mean, they liked Bill Grove. He looked good, he sounded good, and he was doing a hell of a good job. And so I think they had people lined up, maybe even to want to sponsor his program. And of course, that make management be more willing to support him. And it wasn't until later on, I think, that management really had to come to his support
when
he started delving, when he started stepping on some toes with stories that involved even sponsors.
Because that was not an issue in the early days.
No.
But once they got into investigative reporting and editorializing.
That's right.
Then there were going to be some people who were going to be upset.
That's right. Yeah.
And he backed the news department.
Right. And they're really crucial. And these were good friends of Mr. Marshall too, because they would. Well, for instance, the city had a system of passing around who they'd buy their cars from one dealership to another without any bids or anything. And so we got in there and criticized it because they should be going for the lowest bidder and whatnot. Well, the people who had just received the contract to provide automobiles, the owner is a good friend of Mr. Marshall's, and his toe is getting stepped on because it looks like now contract's going to be canceled, and it's going to force it into an open bid and whatnot. So he complains. But this Marshall stood up to that sort of thing.
They were members of the Chamber of Commerce and
precisely,
so forth,
and they're probably
and Rotary
good
Club,
bosom buddies. May have even golfed together. You know.
Well, that's what Norm Davis said. That because he did editorials that stepped on some toes, and he said Glenn Marshall backed him. Even when it came to Mayor Hayden Burns coming in and giving him hell.
That's right. Yeah.
And now, in your later years at the station, and you were at Channel 4 almost 40 years.
Yeah. 39 years, yeah.
You became more and more involved with the news.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There was a time when Grove decided that he needed a director who directed the newscast, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Because before that, I was doing hillbilly shows and everything, doing all sorts of shows, and directing the newscast was just incidental. You'd, with 6 o'clock, it's time for me to go direct the newscast. Mm-hmm. 7 o'clock, I've got a hillbilly show. 8 o'clock, I may have something else. So he wanted somebody who was dedicated to just doing the newscast at 6 and the newscast at 11.
There came a time as the news department evolved and videotape and so forth that Channel 4, I think technology may have helped with this, became a dominant force in journalism, investigative reporting, editorials, etc.,
right.
Under the leadership of Bill Grove and Norm Davis.
Right, precisely. They used, they went after what they considered to be corruption in the government, I think, as in the city government and whatnot, and by putting putting investigative reporters on the job and putting series on. You do a series during the week, 3 minutes on Monday and 3 minutes on Tuesday and 3 minutes on Wednesday, followed up with editorials on the subject, and put the heat on whoever was corrupt at the time.
And lots of documentaries.
Right. Norm
Project 4 documentaries.
Norm is really something else. Now, Norm is intellectual, and what a busy bee, because he did the editorials, he did the documentaries, and he conferred with Grove and guided so much. I don't know how he did it, but he's really some guy. And
they did documentaries on all kinds of things, and frequent documentaries.
I bet you once a month almost.
Yeah.
You know, it was amazing. It was really amazing how he could stand up under all that load.
And they got results.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think we have to say we wouldn't enjoy consolidated government if it weren't for Norm Davis and Bill Grove and those early investigative reporting efforts of Channel 4.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's true. I think that's right. That they showed there was so much wrong with the way our city government was formed, it was put together. We had two different bodies. We had a commission and we had a council, and they were often at odds with each other. And
there was the famous Government by Gaslight documentary.
Well, yeah, there was another one of Norm's things, right? It was great, and that showed the duplicity of the whole thing, and I think it had a lot to do with bringing consolidation to. I don't know how to convey the difference in not having any videotape and things being live, and having the way it was, and the rehearsals, and then the politicals and the politicians coming over and doing their thing, all live, and making the mistakes and not knowing where to look, and I don't know.
And the fascination with this new medium, people were just literally glued to the set.
Well, no.
And so you told me once, the things that would be done to fill up time. If you didn't have any programming, you once told me that you would just push the camera around the studio. The empty studio.
Yeah, right. That was to fill the time in the morning when the network would. Well, first of all, we'd fill the time. They gave us little 5-minute breaks that had to be done locally. We had to go on the air. So all I do is, I was on camera at the time, and I'd just push the camera around the studio, and we'd have maybe a bulletin board that I'd pan, and then I'd push the camera out the back door, and we'd look at people going by and going to work. But that seemed to entertain people at home.
People were watching, right?
They were watching.
Yeah.
That's right.
But there would be no audio or anything particularly?
Well, I imagine they were playing music,
Oh, okay.
but I really don't. I don't know. I don't know that. There was no announcer back there
Yeah.
covering.
So this was just basically filling some time.
That's filling,
And
and
it was a little more interesting than the test pattern.
yeah, that's right. And filling time was, we had the cable in the afternoon, and sometimes the cable would get cut. I don't know, up
Somewhere between
somewhere
here and New York
between
City.
here and Charlotte. And
Yeah, okay.
all of a sudden, you didn't have the cable, and they call in people. We had music. We had musicians. They'd call in the piano player. They'd call in Ginny. They'd call in a couple of announcers, and for whatever time it took, these people would stall playing music, playing songs, trying to tell jokes, and then as people arrived, like Dick Stratton would arrive in the middle of the afternoon, pull him out there, and it was a different kind of world, and you had to keep going. They had to keep on going. There was no.
They wanted to be on the air, and there was nothing coming down the cable.
That's right, and they're probably calling the film and department saying, find a film and that we can put it. And if they found anything, it would probably be wrestling, because we filled a lot of time with wrestling films.
Wrestling was big. Yeah.